Commander, if you still think I am just a soft-skinned backup system, this would be a terrible time to be right. Captain Jack Callahan said it without raising his voice, without looking back, and without taking his left hand off the manual flight yoke. The Aurelian Dawn dropped another 400 feet in less than a second, hard enough to make every warning light on the bridge turn red at once. Commander Lyra Vale slammed one silver-blue hand against the side of her command chair and stared at the main display as the artificial horizon spun like a coin. For the first time in her life, a Royal Aurelian vessel had spoken a sentence no one in her bloodline was supposed to hear. Autopilot failure. Navigation lattice offline. 12 hours earlier, Lyra had laughed at the man now keeping her alive. Not loudly, not crudely, nothing so honest as that. Her mockery had been colder, cleaner, the kind that came dressed in education and rank. At Port Meridian, when the Terran contractor walked beneath the boarding lights with one worn duffel bag, a faded flight jacket, and a paper checklist folded into his breast pocket, she had looked him over and said, "I was promised a pilot, not a museum exhibit." Her officers had smiled. A few had turned away to hide it. Jack Callahan had only nodded, touched 2 fingers to the brim of a cap he was not wearing, and said, "Yes, ma'am." That had annoyed her more than anger would have. Humans were supposed to be emotional, loud, defensive. They were supposed to explain themselves when superior species corrected them. But Callahan had not corrected her. He had walked the hull, tapped the landing struts with a gloved knuckle, asked for the age of the oxygen scrubbers, and spent 20 minutes inspecting the manual thruster valves every Aurelian engineer insisted would never be needed. Now the ship was screaming around them, and those same engineers were strapped in with white faces and quiet prayers. Beyond the forward glass, the dead world Charon 9 filled half the sky, its upper atmosphere glowing rust-orange beneath a storm of charged dust. Gravity mines flickered around the ship like cold stars, bending sensor data into lies. Lyra forced her voice steady. "Captain Callahan, explain what you are doing." "Flying," he said. "That is not an explanation. It is the only one that matters right now." The Dawn rolled sharply, but not randomly. Jack let the nose drop toward the planet, then caught the fall with a short burst from the starboard thrusters. The movement was ugly, physical, almost primitive. Nothing like the smooth mathematical grace of Aurelian flight doctrine. Lyra hated it until she saw the mine they had just missed flash harmlessly behind them. Her throat tightened. "You knew that was there?" Jack's jaw flexed once. "I knew where it wanted us to be." She looked at his hands then, not at the controls, at his hands. They were steady, but not relaxed. There was sweat along his temple. His eyes were locked forward, and something old moved behind them, something heavier than fear. The ship dropped again. A junior officer whispered, "We are going to break apart." Jack reached calmly for his coffee mug, slid it deeper into its magnetic holder, and said, "Not today." Lyra should have hated the arrogance of that answer. Instead, she heard something worse in it. Experience. 12 hours before the Aurelian Dawn began falling toward Charon 9, Captain Jack Callahan stood alone under the white loading lights of Port Meridian and watched the royal cruiser breathe. That was how he thought of ships. Not as machines, not as status symbols, not as polished pieces of government pride, but as big stubborn animals that told the truth if a person knew how to listen. The Dawn was beautiful, no question about that. Sleek silver hull, gold diplomatic markings, shield vanes folded like wings along her spine. Every Aurelian officer on the dock looked at her like she was a cathedral. Jack looked at the left landing strut and frowned. "You got a vibration in the lower coupling," he said to the nearest engineer. The engineer blinked at him through a translucent visor. "The diagnostic array has cleared all departure systems." Jack nodded once. Then the diagnostic array missed it. That was the first time Commander Lyra Vale heard his voice, and she decided almost immediately that she did not like it. It was not rude. That might have been easier. It was calm in a way she found inappropriate, like a mechanic telling a queen her carriage wheel was loose. Lyra stepped down from the boarding ramp in ceremonial command blue, silver blue skin glowing faintly beneath the hangar lights, her posture straight enough to make every junior officer around her stand taller. "Captain Callahan," she said, reading his name from the assignment slate as if it had been placed there by clerical error. "You are the Terran pilot assigned to my vessel?" Jack turned, wiped his hand on a rag, and gave her a small nod. Yes, ma'am. Her eyes moved over his faded jacket, the worn boots, the small duffel bag at his feet. No honor sash. No visible medals. No escort. No family crest. I requested a certified lattice navigator. You got one. You fly manually. When the ship asks for it. A few Aurelian officers exchanged amused looks. Lyra allowed the silence to stretch just long enough to become insulting. My people stopped relying on hand controls 6 centuries ago. Jack glanced back at the hull. That must have been nice. The line was so flat that several translators hesitated before delivering it. Lyra narrowed her eyes. Do humans always make jokes when they are underqualified? Jack folded the rag and tucked it into his back pocket. Only when we are trying to stay polite. That should have ended his assignment. Under Aurelian protocol, a contractor who spoke that plainly to a commander could be replaced before departure. But Port Meridian was backed up with refugee traffic. The diplomatic corridor was closing in 11 hours, and the only other available pilots refused the Karen Drift route after seeing the latest gravity charts. Jack had not refused. He had only asked for coffee, a printed maintenance history, and 20 minutes alone with the ship. Lyra watched him climb into the cockpit and touch each analog switch as if greeting old friends. She told herself it was primitive superstition. She told herself Earth pilots were dramatic because their species mistook stubbornness for competence. But as the Aurelian Dawn lifted from the dock, smooth as glass under his hands, Jack quietly reached above his head and disabled 3 automatic corrections she had been taught never to question. Why did you turn those off? She asked. He looked through the forward glass at the thin ribbon of stars ahead. Because they are correcting for clean space. And this route is not clean? Jack did not answer right away. He just watched the dark beyond the station, where Karen 9 waited like an old scar. No, Commander, he said softly. It is not. For the first hour after departure, Commander Lyra Vale tried to ignore the human in her pilot's seat. It should have been easy. The Aurelian Dawn handled like a royal vessel should, quiet, smooth, almost weightless as it slipped away from Port Meridian and entered the diplomatic corridor. The stars stretched into clean silver lines beyond the forward glass. The crew relaxed by degrees. Even the junior officers who had looked nervous about the Terran contractor began whispering again over their stations. Jack Callahan did not join them. He sat forward in the flight chair with one hand resting near the manual yoke and the other moving through a paper checklist clipped to his knee. Real paper. Lyra kept seeing it out of the corner of her eye, and each time it irritated her more. Captain, she said finally, the onboard system maintains a complete digital checklist. Jack made a small mark with a pencil. I saw that. Then why are you using that? Because paper does not reboot. The communications officer made a quiet sound that might have been a laugh. Lyra turned her head slightly, and the bridge went silent again. You have a talent for sounding clever without answering the concern, she said. Jack looked at the upper left display, then reached up and switched the secondary navigation assist from active to standby. That was not me trying to sound clever, Commander. That was me answering the concern. Lyra rose from her chair. You just disabled a certified Aurelian safety correction. I disabled a correction built for stable gravity lanes. This is a royal ship. Yes, ma'am. It has crossed hostile territory before. I believe it. Then stop treating it like a farm truck from Minnesota. For the first time, Jack glanced back at her. Not angry, not offended, just tired in a way she did not understand. A farm truck from Minnesota would have a spare belt, a tire jack, and somebody in the family who knows what sound means pull over. His eyes returned to the stars. This ship has gold trim over a maintenance panel. No one spoke. Lyra felt heat rise beneath her calm expression. She opened a private command window from her chair and pulled up his personnel file. There had to be something she had missed, some explanation for why the Terran Authority had placed this man on her bridge. The first page was insultingly thin. Captain Jack Callahan. Earth origin. Duluth, Minnesota. Hazard route certified. Civilian contractor. Medical clearance current. No disciplinary actions available for Allied review. She scrolled lower. Most of the file was blank, sealed behind Terran military authority. That was not unusual for former service members. But this was different. The lock was not a normal privacy seal. It was black-level encryption recognized by Sol Defense, the kind used for active war plans and dead treaties. Lyra narrowed her eyes. Mara, she said quietly. At the engineering station, A young Aurelian officer with bright violet eyes leaned closer to her console. "Commander, run a background verification on Captain Callahan." Mara hesitated. "I already did before departure. And his public credentials are valid." "That is not what I asked." Mara lowered her voice. "There is a restricted archive marker beneath the civilian file. I could not open it." Lyra looked toward Jack. He was adjusting the oxygen reserve allocation now, calmly moving 3% from luxury cabin atmosphere to emergency storage. "What kind of marker?" Mara swallowed. "It has a name attached." Lyra waited. Mara turned the private display toward her just enough for the words to appear. "Callahan record. Restricted by Sole Defense Authority." Lyra stared at the line. "Open it." "Commander, the system says Allied access is denied." "Override it." Mara's fingers moved carefully. The console pulsed once, then refused again. Jack spoke from the pilot seat without turning around. "You are not going to like what you find in there." Lyra froze. "You knew I was looking?" "Commander," he said, eyes still on the dark ahead. "Everybody looks eventually." Jack did not answer Lyra right away, and that silence bothered her more than any insult could have. He simply kept his eyes on the forward glass while the Aurelian dawn slid deeper into the Charon drift, where clean stars became smeared light, and the sensors began returning numbers that did not agree with one another. The bridge lights stayed soft and blue. The royal crest still glowed above the main display, and every polished surface pretended this was still a normal diplomatic flight. But Jack had already stopped pretending. He reached overhead and switched the primary autopilot from command authority to advisory mode. Lyra heard the click like a challenge. "Captain Callahan," she said, her voice controlled. "Restore full lattice navigation." "No, ma'am." Several officers turned in their seats. Lyra rose slowly. That was not a request. Jack glanced at the left sensor stack, then at the old-fashioned pressure gauge clipped beside his knee. It should have been. The room went quiet in that sharp, uncomfortable way a room gets when someone plain-spoken has gone too far. Lyra stepped closer to the pilot station. "You are on my vessel." "Yes, ma'am. You will follow my command protocol. When your command protocol stops trying to fly us into a wall, I will be happy to." Mara's hands froze above her engineering console. The communications officer whispered, "Commander, we are receiving a navigation correction from the corridor beacon." Lyra looked at the display. The correction was elegant, official, and perfectly formatted in Aurelian diplomatic code. It showed a slight course adjustment, only 2 degrees starboard, nothing dramatic. "Accept it," Lyra ordered. Jack's hand moved faster than hers. He killed the feed. "Do not touch that beacon." Lyra's eyes flashed. "You just rejected a certified corridor signal." "That was not a beacon. It carried an Aurelian signature. So does your luggage." A low warning tone rolled through the bridge. The stars ahead shifted, not physically, but on the sensors, as if space itself had changed its mind. Jack leaned forward. "There it is." Lyra turned to the main screen. At first she saw nothing. Then the computer stripped away the false data layer, and a line of small cold objects appeared across their path, nearly invisible until they were too close to ignore. Mara's voice went thin. "Gravity mines." The words changed the air in the room. Even Lyra felt it, though she refused to show it. Gravity mines did not explode like old weapons. They bent routes, twisted sensors, and turned a safe course into a trap. Jack had seen them before. That was clear now. He did not ask permission. He pulled the Dawn hard to port, dumped speed, then let the ship drop beneath the mine line with a shudder that made the deck groan under their boots. The artificial gravity flickered. A cup slid across a console and snapped into a safety catch. Lyra gripped the back of the pilot chair. "You knew this would happen." "No," Jack said. "I knew somebody wanted us comfortable." The communications screen lit again, this time with an unknown vessel closing fast from the dark side of Charon 9. Then another. Then 6 more. Their transponders were blank, but their formation was not. Lyra knew enough about raiders to recognize a net when it was tightening. The lead ship sent a message in rough trade English. "Royal vessel, surrender flight control and prepare for escort." Jack did not look impressed. He adjusted his shoulder straps and finally wrapped both hands around the manual yoke. Lyra heard the memory of her own words from the dock, museum exhibit, and for the first time, they tasted foolish. "Captain," she said quietly, "can you fly without the lattice?" Jack's eyes stayed forward. Commander, that is usually when flying starts. The Aurelian Dawn did not turn like a royal cruiser anymore. It lurched, dipped, and slid through the Karen drift like a pickup truck on black ice, and every polished Aurelian officer on the bridge hated it because it worked. Jack Callahan let the ship fall toward the dead planet instead of fighting the pull, then gave the port thrusters a short, ugly burst that shoved them sideways through a gap Lyra could barely see. The inertial dampeners whined. A warning chime started, stopped, then started again as if even the ship had lost confidence in its own opinion. "You are exceeding safe descent limits," Mara said, gripping her console with both hands. "By how much?" Jack asked. 17%. "Then we still have a little room." Lyra stared at him. "That is not how safety margins are meant to be used. It is how they are used when somebody lays mines across the polite route." Another gravity mine shimmered on the edge of the forward display, dragging sensor lines toward it like thread into a drain. Jack did not pull away immediately. He waited one heartbeat longer than Lyra thought any sane pilot should wait, then dropped the nose and let the Dawn slide beneath the distortion. The mine passed above them close enough for the hull to hum. Someone behind her whispered a prayer in Aurelian. Jack whispered something too, so low the translator barely caught it. "Easy, easy. I see you." At first Lyra thought he was speaking to the ship. Then she saw his face. His eyes were forward, but they were not entirely here. His breathing had changed, small and controlled, like a man walking himself back from the edge of an old memory. His right thumb tapped the flight yoke 3 times, paused, then 3 times again. Not random. A habit. A count. "Captain," Lyra said, softer than she intended. "Are you medically impaired?" Jack gave a short laugh, without humor. "No, ma'am. Just remembering something I would rather not." The Raider formation tightened behind them, confident now, herding the Dawn toward a band of broken satellites and frozen debris left over from whatever had killed Karen 9 decades before. Their messages kept arriving, each one more smug than the last. "Surrender flight control. Reduce power. Prepare for transfer." Jack ignored every word. Lyra, however, could not ignore the fact that he was flying through a graveyard as if he knew where all the old bones were buried. "You have been here before," she said. Jack's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would deny it. Instead, he reached up and shut off the proximity alarm because it had become useless noise. "A long time ago. In military service?" No answer. "Captain. Commander. With respect, I am trying to keep your ship in one piece." The words were calm, but there was a weight under them that made her stop pushing. Another piece of debris spun ahead, large enough to confuse the sensors, small enough that the computer wanted to treat it as harmless. Jack did not. He rolled the Dawn over it, belly up for 2 seconds, then used the planet's gravity to slingshot them into a narrow corridor between 2 mine clusters. The bridge went almost silent. Not peaceful. Stunned. Lyra looked at the navigation path they had just survived. No Aurelian Flight Academy would teach that maneuver. No Royal Autopilot would even attempt it. It was too messy, too human, too dependent on nerve, memory, and the willingness to be uncomfortable. Jack exhaled slowly, and for one brief second Lyra saw his left hand tremble before he pressed it flat against the console. Not fear. Not weakness. Restraint. The same kind of restraint she had mistaken for dull obedience at Port Meridian. Mara's voice broke the silence. "Commander, the restricted file marker is reacting to our current location." Lyra turned. "What do you mean?" Mara swallowed. "Karen, 9 is listed inside the sealed archive." Jack did not look back, but his shoulders changed, barely, as if the name had landed somewhere deep. Lyra looked from the file warning to the human at the controls, and the first piece of the truth settled coldly into place. He had not been guessing. He had been remembering. Lyra did not ask Jack for permission again. There was no room left for pride on the bridge, not with the Aurelian Dawn sliding between gravity mines and the Raider ships closing in behind them like wolves that had learned to wear uniforms. She opened a private command pane beside her chair, lowered the brightness until only she and Mara could see it, and placed her authorization seal over the locked Terran archive. The system refused her twice. On the 3rd attempt, Mara added the emergency clause for an endangered royal vessel, and the black seal changed from access denied to limited witness clearance. Lyra expected a disciplinary note, perhaps an old flight citation, Maybe some human military embarrassment buried under dramatic security language. Instead, the first line made her forget to breathe. Callahan record. Sole defense restricted. Hazard rescue classification. 312 confirmed rescue flights. 17 colony evacuations. 9 black zone insertions. 19 manual landings after total system failure. 0 civilian passengers lost under active command. The bridge tilted hard, and Lyra grabbed the side of her chair before her knees could betray her. Jack said, "Hold on," and the entire ship obeyed him better than it had ever obeyed her. He brought the nose down through a line of false sensor ghosts, cut thrust for 2 full seconds, then restarted the engines in a staggered burn that made the deck kick under their feet. Behind them, 2 raider vessels overshot the turn and vanished from the close-range display, not destroyed in fire, not glorified, simply gone from the chase, swallowed by the same trap they had set. Jack did not cheer. He did not even smile. Lyra looked back to the file, and a colder truth opened beneath the numbers. Karen, 9 evacuation. Classified diplomatic incident. Civilian extraction from failed mining colony. 4,800 persons removed from unstable gravity zone. Allied pilots declined entry due to lattice collapse risk. Terran pilot Callahan completed final 19 departures manually. Lyra read the sentence 3 times because her mind kept rejecting it. Allied pilots declined entry. That meant Aurelians. Her people. Her trained navigators. Her elegant academy legends. They had looked at this same dead world, this same broken gravity, and they had stayed outside. The human she had mocked had gone in. "Commander," Mara whispered, "there is more." Lyra almost told her to stop. She wanted one more minute of ignorance. One more minute where the world was simple and humans were primitive, and she was still the kind of officer who could judge a man by his jacket. But the file continued without mercy. Several rescue crew members remained unaccounted for during final departure. Pilot Callahan returned against extraction order to recover emergency beacons. Official commendation sealed to prevent escalation with Aurelian command. Lyra looked up slowly. Jack's face was lit by warning red and the pale orange glow of Karen 9. His hands were steady again, but his eyes were not empty. They were full of things he refused to hand to strangers. "Captain," she said, and for the first time the rank did not sound like paperwork. He kept flying. "Now is not a good time." Why was this hidden? His mouth tightened. Because governments like clean stories. The raiders transmitted again, louder this time, ordering surrender with the confidence of predators who had no idea they were chasing a man through his own nightmare. Lyra closed the file, but the number stayed with her. 312. 19. 0. Her shame arrived quietly, without drama, and sat heavy in her chest. She had mistaken silence for emptiness. She had mistaken worn boots for low status. She had mistaken restraint for lack of worth. Jack banked the dawn toward a narrow strip of darkness between 2 mine fields and said, "Commander, I need emergency authority over shield timing." Lyra did not hesitate this time. "You have it." Every officer on the bridge turned toward her. She did not look away from Jack. All of it. The moment Lyra gave him full authority, Jack Callahan stopped flying like a contractor and started flying like a man who had been waiting for permission to save everyone in the room. He did not sit taller. He did not make a speech. He just reached across the console, pulled 4 shield controls into manual sequence, and said, "Mara, I need shield power on my mark only. Not before. Not after. On my word." Mara looked once at Lyra. Lyra nodded. "Do exactly what he says." The young officer swallowed and placed both hands over the shield timing interface. Behind them, the Voskari raiders spread into a crescent, confident now, pushing the Aurelian Dawn toward the narrowest part of the minefield. Their leader came over the channel again, his translated voice smooth with amusement. "Royal vessel, your primitive pilot has done well. Do not make him responsible for your final mistake." Jack tilted his head slightly, as if listening to bad traffic on a rainy morning. "Mute him." The communications officer obeyed. Lyra watched the tactical display. The raiders were not firing. They did not need to. Their plan was cleaner than that. They were tracking the Dawn's shield signature and using it like a leash, matching every correction, tightening every route, waiting until the royal cruiser had no direction left except surrender. Lyra felt sick when she understood it. "They are following our shield wake." Yes, ma'am, Jack said. They have been following it since the first false beacon. Can we change the frequency? They would adapt. Can we outrun them? Not in this ship. He glanced at her for half a second. But we can disappear. Every Aurelian officer on the bridge went still. Mara's voice came out thin. Disappear how? Jack looked forward again. Turn the shields off. The silence was immediate and absolute. Lyra heard the ship creak around them, heard her own breath catch, heard the old, arrogant part of herself almost say no. A royal cruiser without shields in the Karen Drift was not bold. It was madness. But the file was still open in her mind. 312 rescue flights. 19 manual landings. 0 civilian passengers lost. Lyra straightened. Prepare to drop shields. The tactical officer turned in disbelief. Commander, that violates every survival protocol on this vessel. Lyra did not blink. Then it is fortunate we have someone aboard who survived without them. Jack gave a small nod, not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. Mara, in 3 seconds, cut shields to 0. Leave hull dampeners active. On my second mark, bring shields back at 30%, aft only. Mara whispered, understood. Jack's hands tightened on the yoke. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The shield glow vanished from the forward glass. For one breath, the Aurelian dawn felt naked beneath the stars. Alarms begged for correction. The computer tried to seize control. Jack locked it out with one hard switch and let the ship drop. On the radar display, their formation scattered. Without the shield wake, they were suddenly chasing an echo. Jack rolled the dawn sideways through a seam of dead sensor space, used the pull of Karen 9 like a river current, and slipped beneath the route the raiders expected him to take. Second mark, he said. Mara brought the aft shield back. The raiders corrected too late. 3 of their ships followed the ghost path into their own gravity trap and vanished from the pursuit grid, systems overwhelmed, engines dead, drifting harmlessly into emergency shutdown. No fire. No glory. Just arrogance meeting physics. The bridge of the Aurelian dawn stayed silent until Lyra realized every officer was staring at the human pilot they had laughed at. Jack adjusted the course by 2 degrees and said, that was one mistake they do not get to make twice. Lyra looked at him, her voice quieter now. How many more mistakes are they allowed? Jack's eyes remained on the dark ahead, where a much larger shadow was beginning to rise from behind Karen 9. Depends on how fast they learn. The shadow rising from behind Karen 9 was not another raider ship. It was a command carrier, broad and dark against the planet's rust-colored glow, its hull shaped like a blade laid flat across the stars. The bridge sensors identified it as Voskeri, then hesitated, then added a second tag that made Lyra's blood run cold. Aurelian military transponder, encrypted escort class. Mara stared at the readout as if the console had insulted her family. Commander, that cannot be right. Lyra stepped closer. Run it again. I have run it 3 times. Mara's voice dropped. Someone gave them an Aurelian clearance mask. The words landed harder than any alarm. The raiders had not guessed their route. They had not stumbled across a royal vessel by luck. Someone inside Aurelian Command had sold them a door and handed them the key. Jack did not look surprised. That hurt Lyra more than she expected. You suspected this, she said. I suspected something. Why did you not say it? Because people do not like hearing that their house might be leaking from the inside. The command carrier painted the dawn with a targeting beam, not firing, just holding them in place with the confidence of something too large to hurry. A message opened across the bridge speakers, polished and smug. Commander Vale, your pilot has performed beyond expectation. Transfer control, and you may keep your passengers unharmed. Lyra's face hardened. They know my name. Jack checked the fuel numbers. Yes, ma'am. They know who is aboard. Looks that way. And they know you. That finally made him pause. Only for a second, but she saw it. The carrier sent a private packet next, addressed not to Lyra, but to Captain Jack Callahan. Mara decrypted the header and went very still. Captain, it references Karen 9. Lyra looked at Jack. What happened here? For a long moment. The only answer was the low strain of the engines and the distant whisper of dust against the hull. Jack kept one hand on the yoke, but his other hand moved to the edge of the console and stayed there, flat, steadying himself. There was a colony down there, he said. Mining families. Contractors. Kids who had never seen Earth except in pictures. The gravity lattice failed during a storm, and every clean ship in orbit waited for permission to enter. Lyra said nothing. Permission did not come fast enough. His voice stayed even, but it had gone rough around the edges. So a few of us went in anyway. She thought of the file. 19 manual departures. For 1,800 people. Clean numbers hiding dirty hours. And the missing rescue crews. Lyra asked. Jack's eyes did not leave the carrier. They were not missing to me. The quiet after that was different. Even the officers who did not fully understand human grief understood enough to stop moving. Jack continued. That record everyone keeps trying to dress up as a legend was just a list of bad days. Every number was somebody cold, scared, waiting on a ramp, hoping the next ship had room. 0 civilian passengers lost sounds nice in a report. It does not tell you who stayed behind loading stretchers. It does not tell you who waved us off because the ship was too heavy. It does not tell you whose voice I still hear when the alarms start. Lyra felt her shame deepen into something more useful. Respect, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Why hide it, she asked. Jack gave a tired half-smile. Because if they called it heroism, somebody would have had to admit they ordered us not to go. The carrier's weapons lock tightened. The Dawn's computer recommended surrender in 3 comm languages. Lyra closed the recommendation with one touch. Captain Callahan, she said, her voice steady now. What do you need? Jack looked at the dead planet ahead, then at the giant ship blocking the stars. I need you to trust me when this gets ugly. Lyra did not hesitate. I already should have. Jack did not fly away from the command carrier. He flew toward Karen 9. For one stunned second, no one on the bridge understood what he was doing, because every survival display on the Aurelian Dawn showed the same thing in different colors. Atmospheric entry was unsafe. Gravity distortion was unsafe. Shield stability was unsafe. The royal computer spoke in its calm, polished voice and recommended surrender again. Lyra reached over and muted it herself. Jack glanced at her, and she gave the smallest nod. You have the helm, Captain. He turned the nose down. The dead planet filled the forward glass until there was no more room for stars. Only rust-colored cloud bands, and the pale glow of old electrical storms crawling across the upper atmosphere. Behind them, the Voskeri carrier followed. Too proud to slow down, too confident in stolen Aurelian codes and oversized engines to believe a human pilot was leading it somewhere on purpose. Mara called out numbers as fast as she could read them. Outer hull temperature rising. 30,000 feet to storm layer. Shield wake unstable. Good, Jack said. Lyra looked at him. Good. They are still tracking it. The Dawn hit the upper atmosphere like a stone skipping across a lake. The whole ship shuddered from bow to stern. But Jack did not fight the shaking. He let it speak to him. He rode the rough air, corrected late instead of early, and gave the ship just enough thrust to stay alive without looking graceful. The carrier behind them tried to copy the route with perfect military precision, and that was its mistake. Karen 9 did not reward perfection. It punished arrogance. Jack dropped the Dawn through a narrow pocket of calm air, cut the aft shield for 3 seconds, and let the storm swallow their signature. The carrier lost its borrowed lock. Its engines flared too hard. Its guidance system chased a path that was no longer there. On the tactical display, the great black shape drifted off course, not in flames, not in glory, just helplessly committed to the wrong answer. Emergency beacons blinked from its hull as it fell into a forced shutdown high above the storm layer. Mara whispered, "They are disabled." Jack exhaled through his nose. "Send their coordinates to Port Meridian Rescue Control." Lyra stared at him. "After everything they did, you are calling rescue?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw the man behind the record, not the legend, not the insult she had made of him, not the quiet contractor with old boots and a paper checklist. Just a tired man from Minnesota who had learned, at terrible cost, that survival meant nothing if you became the kind of person who left others behind. "Commander," he said, "we do not have to become them to beat them." The bridge went still. No one laughed now. No one looked at his worn jacket or his human hands on the controls as if they belonged to something lesser. Lyra stood beside the pilot chair as the Aurelian Dawn climbed out of the storm, scorched, shaking, alive. The first clean stars appeared ahead, one by one, like lights being turned back on in a house after a long night. When Port Meridian answered the distress relay, Lyra opened a fleet-wide channel with her own command seal. Her voice did not tremble. This is Commander Lyra Vale of the Aurelian Dawn. Captain Jack Callahan has saved this vessel, its passengers, and the lives of those who tried to take it. His restricted record is to remain sealed unless he chooses otherwise. But let the official report show this clearly. We survived because a human knew when not to trust a perfect machine, and because he remembered what the rest of us were too proud to learn. Jack said nothing. He only eased the ship back into open space, where the ride became smooth again and the alarms finally fell quiet. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Why did your people hide men like you? Jack watched the stars. Maybe we did not hide them, he said softly. Maybe we just stopped listening when quiet people told us who they were. Lyra lowered her eyes, not in shame alone, but in understanding. Some records are not built to make legends. Some are built from people who kept showing up when nobody had the courage to ask again. And sometimes, the strongest person in the room is not the one demanding respect. It is the one steady enough to save lives without needing applause.